Hey friends, Senate Eskridge here. Thanks so much for joining me on this month's webinar. Is it better to buy my own rental property or invest in a syndication? A lot of times people will dilly-dally here in the very beginning to try to let more people come in, and I'm not really that kind of guy. I like to start on time, end on time, and dive right in. Let's see who's on the chat here. Let's see, we've got wow, a couple people from Idaho, where I live. That's awesome. One from California, Texas. Hello, hello there from Texas. We got somebody here from Florida that I recognize. That's awesome. And some new people that I don't know yet. I'm really excited to get to know you. For those of you that are on this webinar that I don't know yet, but we'll get to know each other soon. So with that, let's dive in and let's talk about, is it better to buy my own rental property or invest in a syndication? I've gotten a lot of comments about this and lots of questions ahead of time that I plugged in here. So that said, you guys, if you have any questions as we're going through this, you can put them in the Q&A or into the chat at any time. I'll try to answer them as we're going through the presentation, but I will definitely go back at the end and make sure that I have checked off all the questions that are asked. So again, any questions pop up, throw them in the Q&A or the chat. So you guys, the goal of the presentation today is really to help you decide, whether it's better for you to go buy your own duplex or single family or to invest in a syndication, right? Really, that's the difference. And we're going to cover a few of these topics today, right? The financial goals, the time commitment, lifestyle preferences, and really the long-term strategy. Because what you're going to hear me say on this presentation a couple of times is there's really not one right or wrong answer to this. It really depends on you and what it is that is important to you, right? And so let's dive in and talk a little bit more about, why this really matters, right? If you choose the wrong strategy, I mean, you can see the bullet points here on the left. You can do burnout, you can get burnout. There's really not scalability in the wrong strategy for you, unnecessary stress, and missed opportunities. And I think that missed opportunities is one of the biggest things, right? So we miss analyzing the opportunity cost of future investments when we make an investment that doesn't fit our strategy, right? So that strategy should align. You should have alignment, clarity, and that's going to bring you better decision making and that sustainable long-term growth. Because I did single family for 10 years. Those of you that know my story, I started off in single family in 2009. I did that for 10 years and I bought and sold. Well, I've done more transactions than most realtors in my area. Let's just say it that way. Um, and bought and sold multiple different times, over 100 times, bought and buying and selling. Never been an agent and never been a wholesaler. But the transactions just got so time consuming and I just got so burned out. And I kept running into roadblocks there towards the end. This talks about poor scalability. Well, once you get to like 10 single family loans, it just becomes an absolute nightmare to keep getting more. You got to switch into commercial, and then the commercial department's like, we don't do single family houses, and it just gets really weird, right? You have this artificial ceiling um, in that realm. And then in 2019, I switched over to multifamily, and it just changed the entire thing for me. Absolutely different. So let's talk a little bit more about direct property ownership and what that looks like. So, you know, um, these are things like it says here, single family rentals, duplexes, small multifamily, like 4 units, 5 units, even Airbnb, right? Really what this comes down to is, yes, if your name is on title, if you're the direct owner of an asset, it is not passive. Okay. Really, I should have titled this or talked about this as, you know, owning your own property versus working with a bigger syndicator. Really, that's what it comes down to. The asset class really doesn't matter here. If you have a small storage unit facility, you're going to have the same problems. Okay. When you're the direct owner, you are responsible for everything. This says investor responsibilities over here on the right, and it lists a few things, right? This financing, management, maintenance. But really, what it comes down to is you are buying a business that you have to operate and you have to run. And and here's the thing: if you're a direct owner, okay, my opinion is you need to be an expert on that asset class. And that's one of the biggest differences here that you need to understand. There's nothing wrong with owning a single family rental, but you need to be an expert in that business, right? Especially if you're going to scale and go past one and get into four or five or six and into duplexes and things like that. You've got to be an expert and you're responsible for all of these things over here and more. Um, One time I was on vacation in Florida. I mean, I live in Idaho, for those of you that don't know. And I was on vacation in Florida and I got a phone call at like 4 in the morning Florida time, which is 2 in the morning Idaho time, from the police department. And turns out there was a drug deal gone wrong in one of my properties and somebody kicked the door down. So there was no door on the property and everyone who lived there got arrested. So at 2 in the morning, my house is unsecured and nobody's there, and I'm thousands of miles away. What do you do? Right? I mean, luckily I had a handyman that I could call and pay a whole bunch of money to get him out of bed and go and put up a piece of plywood so that I could deal with it later. Um, but I had to fix it, no matter what. That's what it means to be a direct rental property owner. The buck stops with you. But what are the advantages? Let's not beat up on it, right? There is some good stuff about being the direct owner, right? One of the biggest ones is this first one on the list: full control over decisions. If you have a team of people that you have to work with, you could delegate and give authority to one person, but that decision also you got to have the group's consensus, and that's a problem when you don't always agree, right? So if you're on your direct ownership, you get to make all the decisions. This forced appreciation opportunity, that's actually there in lots of different businesses, but the key is you get to force the appreciation through that ability to self-manage. There's tax benefits in lots of these, but there are tax benefits to owning a single family house for sure. I love the hands-on experience, that piece of it, and that flexible financing options. The flexible financing, if you own all the properties all on your own, you can go to this bank for this and this bank for that, and hard money loans and owner carries, and there's lots of different ways that you can get into these deals. They're very flexible. There's a lot of things that aren't listed here that are also a benefit, right? Uh, Owning single family rentals on your own, you can focus just in your market where you live. They're pretty scalable, right? You don't have to focus on just different markets that are extremely high growth. You can invest right in your backyard typically. Plus, you get to make all the decisions, right? Which is so awesome. But what are the challenges, you guys? If those are all the benefits, what are the challenges? Again, the most important one I think is the one on the top: time intensive. The average that somebody spends on a property that they own is approximately 4 hours a month. And that proved out when I was at the end of my single family journey. I had 17 buildings, mostly triplexes, a couple duplexes, a couple fourplexes, and I was spending on average 4 hours per property. I did some Googling and found that the average profit per unit on the single family space is about $200 per month. So let's just do some math here, right? So if you are making $200 a month and spending 4 hours a month, right, that comes out to $50 an hour. I know, looking at the list of these people on here, there's several of you that make more than $50 an hour in your job. Just something to think about, right? The next one is active management is required. You are in charge of everything, as we talked about, right? Even if you hire a property manager, you've got to oversee that property manager, make sure they're doing their job right, make sure that they're not spending too much money, make sure that they're getting the right handyman, that the bills are all getting paid. You've got to process all of those types of things. Difficulty to scale quickly. As I talked about, it took me 10 years, right, to get up into that 17 properties with, single family, multifamily, things like that. Sure, it's easy to get into, it's easy to get started. I truly believe that anybody can buy a duplex and rent it out. But to get to 10 or 20 duplexes, very, very, very hard. Then I want to skip down here to the vacancy risk. If you have one single family property, which by the way, in my opinion, is the riskiest investment you can make to own one. Um, and I told you the average is $200 profit, right? But that's only if it's rented. I want you to ask yourself this question. If it's vacant, how much money do you make every month? Well, you guys, you're probably losing money. You still got to pay the mortgage. You probably have to have power. You probably have to have water. You probably have to have gas. You definitely have to have insurance, right? All of these expenses are still coming, whether you're getting rent or not, right? So if you have a single family house, and it's vacant, you're losing anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month, depending on how you set it up. If you had a 100-unit apartment building and one unit is vacant, you now have 99 others paying all of those bills. In fact, when you have a 100-unit apartment building, you really don't even want them all full. You want to have one vacant so you can always be testing the top of the market rent. Having a vacancy in a 100-unit apartment building is not a bad thing. But in a single family house, it is an absolute nightmare. According to my just rough calculations, I think 4 units is where you can cover one vacancy, right, and still break even. Right. So if you can get up to more than four multifamily houses or a fourplex or two duplexes, something like that. Again, depending on the situation, those three should cover the fourth, typically. All right. So that's a lot about single family. But what is a syndication? What is this thing we're talking about, syndication? We're going to compare this to. So in syndications, you have two different groups of people. You have the general partners over here, okay, and the limited partners over here. And you guys, as I mentioned, anybody can buy a duplex and rent it out, okay? Um, but then you become the landlord. You got to deal with the tenants, toilets, termites, all of those things that we just talked about, okay? In a syndication, the general partners handle all of that. You come in as a limited partner or an LP, okay? As an LP, you really only have a few jobs, okay? So we'll talk in a minute about mistakes people make, but you've got to vet the deal and vet the sponsor, right? And that's the first and most important job. Make sure that this investment fits your goals and your plans. But after you've invested your money, you really only have 3 jobs, okay? And we'll cover this more in a few minutes, right? But you have to read the investor update that comes out every month, sometimes every quarter. You have to deposit the money in your account, and you have to send the tax documents called a K-1 to your accountant at the end of the year. Really, those 3 things are the only thing you have to do. And you know what? If you ask me nice, I'll do the last 2 for you, but I can't really read the investor update for you. That really doesn't do much good. So if you have limited responsibility as a limited partner, the general partners take on all of the other responsibilities. They're running the day to day, they're making sure all the tenants are taken care of, they're getting those 4 in the morning phone calls from the police. They're dealing with the insurance claims, they're dealing with all of the stuff that you don't do, right? Because you're a limited partner. There's also something to understand about risk here, right? As a limited partner versus a general partner. As a limited partner, your risk is limited to the amount of money you have invested in this deal. Okay. Go back to the single family days. You have all the risk, right? If you get sued, you're getting sued. If the building burns down, you have to deal with that. If you lose money in a month, you have to deal with that, right? You take on all of the risks, and at the end of the day, you have to pay all the bills no matter what. Well, that's exactly what general partners do in a syndication. You have limited risk. Your risk is only the amount you've invested. The general partners take on all that other risk. Something to think about. So, what are the advantages of investing in a syndication? The biggest one is, again, at the very top, right? Passive investing. You don't have any work. You only have those 3 jobs that I talked about earlier, right? But also access to larger deals. I said earlier, you guys, anybody can buy a duplex and rent it out. But if you want to go buy a 200 unit apartment building, you need a big team of people, special skills, and a lot of money, right? Well, the general partners, people like me, right? They have the special skills and the team of people. And then they go to limited partners to get the capital. That's the big difference, right, between a syndication. You can also get better diversification, right? This says geographic diversification, but you can get more diversification just in general, right? You can invest, if you're only interested in multifamily, well, you could get multifamily in Texas and then in Arizona and then Georgia, right? And then in Idaho, where I live, you can get multifamily all over. But you could also put some money in multifamily, in mobile home parks, RV parks, different businesses, debt funds, heck, even venture capital. Could you imagine if you were able to give even $10,000 to Jeff Bezos when he was still running Amazon out of his garage? That would be absolutely phenomenal, right? And these are the types of things you can get into in syndication, right? You no longer have to be an expert in that topic. You just have to have experts that you trust. Single family or direct ownership, rather, you've got to be the expert. But investing as a passive investor, you can work um, with experts in multiple different fields, which is, and again, in my opinion, phenomenal. So, what are the challenges? Let's be fair, right? Let's look at the challenges. Okay. You don't have as much control, that is for sure. Sometimes you get to give input, depending on the size of the team, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, you are reliant on those operators. Now, the third bullet point, illiquidity. That's something we really got to talk about. This is true, really, if you're a direct owner versus, and also if you're in a syndication. You don't really have liquidity when you're owning real estate or any of those types of things. Now, in single family, it might be easier to go and sell the property or to refinance or something to make it a little bit more liquid. But in a syndication, you guys, really you're in it for the long haul. If I tell you this is a 5 year business plan, it might take six. Okay. Can you get out early? Yes, absolutely you can. Well, no, that's not the way to say it. It's possible that you get out early, but really what we've got to do to get you out early, we've got to find somebody else to buy your position. That's really what it comes down to. And that person has to qualify and they have to have the cash and you have to negotiate the value of your investment. So it is a little bit more illiquid. Sponsor risk, you guys, sponsor risk is the most important thing when evaluating a syndication. I've got a whole slide about it, mistakes people make and questions to ask. But at the end of the day, the most important question is who is running the asset? Who's the boots on the ground? Who's actually doing the day-to-day work? Have they done this before? Can they uh, complete the business plan that they're telling you that they can complete? Right? So that's something that's important to know. And then this last bullet point, right? Accreditation requirements for some deals. Almost always, when you're going into a syndication, you've got to have some kind of a qualification. If you're investing in a 506C deal, C is in Charlie, you've got to be an accredited investor. If you're investing in a 506B deal, B is in boy, you've got to know the sponsor before they come out with the deal, right? So, I mean, that's not the only way, but there are other ways to get into a B, but that's the biggest thing. So, you guys, really, I want to talk about what is your time worth, and that's something that's really we've got to evaluate here. I told you guys earlier about the average in profit that single families make versus the hours. But as a rental owner, you've got to deal with all of these issues. And if that's what you want and you like it, that's great. Do that. But in a syndication, you have those three jobs, right? You've got to evaluate the deal, and then you've got to uh, evaluate the operator, and then review the reporting, deposit the check, and give the tax documents to your K1, right? Pretty easy. So this is the key question, right? This question right here really will help you determine which route you should go. Do you want another job or more passive investment? And you guys, either answer is fine. I'm not going to tell you that owning direct property is bad. I still own a lot of property, right? Um, I just want to help you make that decision. Which one is better for you? So let's dive in a little bit more and compare side by side, right? So, which one scales more easily, right? Rental properties, they're limited by financing. We talked about that. You really 10's really a really hard number, right? Once you get past 10, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're like, I'm not giving you any more single family loans. Some banks will only give you 4 loans per bank, right? Now there are ways around it. It just gets harder, right? Um, and then there's more complexity because you've got multiple addresses, right? If you're going to buy 10 units, would you rather buy 10 single family spaces or one 10-unit property? I know I'd prefer one 10-unit property, right? Syndications, you've got access to larger assets, better diversification, less burden, operational burden for you, and you could potentially scale faster, right? How quickly can you come up with chunks of cash? 25, 50, 100,000. It doesn't the every investment's going to have a minimum, right? But those minimums are usually pretty small. So how quickly can you get into multiple syndications? It's how quickly can you come up with, say, 25 or $50,000? How many times can you do that? The same thing's going to happen with rental properties, you guys, because you have to put in a down payment, right? Yeah. So how often can you buy a new rental property? Well, how quickly can you get a down payment? Same types of questions. So what matters more to you, right? As a rental owner, you get more control and more responsibility. Syndications, you get less control but more freedom. As it says here, neither one's inherently better. Let's compare some risks. Some of these, we already hit all of these things, but we're going to hit on them a little bit more. On the rental side, you've got tenant issues, vacancies, repairs, market shifts, local concentration risk if you have too many units in one space. Plus, you have as a direct owner, right? Not just rental properties, but as a direct owner, you've got those calls in the middle of the night and dealing with the property manager and dealing with all those other issues, right? It's a big, big deal. Syndication risks, yeah, the operator's got to execute, right? Like I've said 3 or 4 times now, the most important question I think is who's running this deal? Because if they can't do their job, you're going to lose your money. Market timing, illiquidity, deal structure risk. Deal structure risk, let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So in deal structure risk, really what we're talking about most of the time is the debt. As a direct owner, you have direct responsibility and usually really deep understanding of the debt and the loan you're getting. In a syndication, you should also have really deep understanding and comprehend how the debt is structured. What I see is a lot of times people don't, right? They just kind of gloss over that. And you don't want to do that. You want to understand because that's one of the easiest ways to kill a deal is having the wrong kind of debt. Another issue, I'm glad it's on here on this slide. I might have forgotten it. Capital call potential. So a capital call, if you let's say you put in $50,000, right, into a syndication, and the operator runs into some kind of a problem, and they've run out of money, right? What they're going to do is they're going to go to all of the investors, all the LPs, the limited partners, and they're going to say, hey, Stephen, right? I need you to put in an extra, say, 20% of the capital that you originally put in. And here are the reasons why. And this is what we're going to do with your money. Usually the conversation is something like this. This property is failing, and I need this money to refinance or do XYZ so you don't lose all of your money. So you pony up another 20% to protect your original investment. So in a $50,000 investment, it'd be coming up with another 10,000. Well, what if you don't have the 10,000 at that time or don't want to put it in? What happens? So usually what you do is you get diluted, right? So if they're asking for 20%, anyone who doesn't give that 20% or only gives part of it, they're going to take that percentage of that ownership, say 20%, right? And they're going to give it to the people who do participate. So if you do participate, your ownership could go up. If you don't, your ownership could go down. That's the risk of a capital call. Obviously, we can get more technical on that if we wanted to, but I think that covers it pretty well. Okay, but what about the returns? Let's compare the returns. How do these things make money? Because honestly, it's pretty similar. It really is. So on a direct ownership, right? I don't love that this just says rental property should say direct ownership. Usually, you're going to see some cash flow. You know, and these are usually going to start pretty modest, and then they grow over time. Well, you can see over here in syndications, you get the same thing, cash distributions. You guys, I've got one syndication right now that's paying 16% cash on cash to the investor. Somebody puts in $100,000, it pays $1,333 a month. But they don't usually all start that way. You know, if you buy an apartment building, maybe the first year there's no cash flow. And second year you get 5%, third year you get 6%, right? I'm making up these numbers as I go here, but they're only examples. They usually start off low and then grow. But again, sometimes I have them that are really high, 16%. Appreciation on single family, yes, you have that. But also in syndications, you've got equity growth. Rental properties, you've got the loan pay down. Okay, well, you have that too in syndications, but also in syndications, you get a preferred return. Let me explain what a preferred return is, right? You don't always get this. Sometimes you do. Let's just say you have a 6% preferred return. What that means is that you're going to make 6% on your money before the general partners ever make a dime. So it puts you it puts you in line to get paid first, right? That's what a preferred return does. Tax advantages, you guys, almost every physically owned real estate deal is going to have some kind of tax advantages, whether it's through a syndication or not. Now, could you get more in rental properties? Maybe, right? But sometimes people don't do this in single family because it's cost prohibitive, right? So big differences here, but they all kind of match up. It's just how do you want to bake your cake is really the question, right? These are all just layers, and it's how do you want to bake it? So who should consider direct ownership or rentals? Somebody who wants full control. If you want full control of the actual underlying asset, syndications are not for you. If you enjoy being hands-on, right? You want to go mow the lawn or have to hire somebody to mow the lawn, right? If you want to be the person that gets a call at 2 in the morning, great. If you have the extra time, awesome. If you prefer direct ownership, you should be a direct owner, right? But what I have found is that's not what most people are going for, right? Most people want passive investing, okay? Because they have limited time, right? Most of the people I work with have got another job or they own a business or they're doing whatever, okay? They want diversification, professional management, exposure to larger assets, value scalability. Uh, the big thing about diversification, I've hit on this a couple of times, but the fact that you can be in multiple markets, you can be in multiple asset classes, and you mean multiple time frames, right? Like you can get true diversification because you no longer have to be the expert. You can now work with experts. That's one of the biggest pieces. All right, so mistakes people often make, right? And this first one, this first one shocks me, right? Chasing returns without understanding the risk. You guys, I told you I've got a 16% deal that's got great returns. Those are great returns, great cash on cash, and the risks are really, really low. Okay, but I've got another deal that I evaluated and I decided to pass on, and it paid like 45% returns, but I didn't feel that the risks were worth it. Okay, so we passed on that deal because it doesn't matter what the returns say on paper or what they're projecting. What really matters is, do you keep your capital and how much money do you actually put in your pocket? Okay, and so if you can't justify the business plan in your head, why would you put money behind it? All right, I'm going to hit just a few of these. I beat up on this evaluating the operators a few times. But when you work with somebody like me, yes, I'm not the person out there running the deal at the end of the day. So you want to ask questions about me? Yes. Is your money safe with me? And what kind of due diligence have I done? And all that kind of stuff. You want to know about me, But at the end of the day, you want to know who's really running the asset at the end, who's the in person at the end, right? That's what's really, really important. Um, Investing without clear goals, right? You don't want to just willy-nilly throw money at something. You want to have a goal. You want to have something that you're shooting towards. And then this last one is also a really big one. Humans are emotional animals. Even those of us that appear stoic, right? We make decisions based on emotion. And at the end of the day, you're not going to win doing that. You need to have a plan, you need to have a strategy, and you need to have a goal, right? I've worked with several individual investors to help them build their investing strategy, figure out what it is they like, what they don't like. Do they want short term, long term? What kind of returns they want? What kind of risks they want? You've really got to make these decisions based on strategy and not emotion. Okay, a couple more slides. We're almost done, you guys. We're flying through this. Questions to ask before you invest. I'm not going to read each one of these for you, and you can come up with more of these if you want. But really, it's what it comes down to is what is going to make you happier? What's going to make your heart happier? Don't make this decision about an active owner versus a syndicator based on the amount of money you're going to make or any of those kind of things. It's a lifestyle decision. And that's what really, really matters here is the lifestyle. Find the strategy that best fits your lifestyle and the way that you're going to live, right? Do you want to be getting those phone calls or not? That's where it really comes down to. So you guys, if this sparked your interest and you want to learn more, if you scan this QR code right here, this will help you give you my contact information. You can book a call right here where we can dive deeper into this, answer any more questions that you have, and really go forward. I'd love to tell you more about the syndications that I run and how I benefit people through those syndications. Any question you have, be happy to answer it. Also, one more plug in that QR code. There is a 7-day free 7-day passive investing course where I dive deeper into the types of questions you should ask, what you should look for, kind of diversifications you can expect. And I look a little different in that 7-day course as well. I got a longer beard, so just so you know, it was wintertime. Anyway, all right, friends. I must have done a really good job. I don't see any questions here. Let me check and see the Q&A, see if there's any more. All right, friends. One more plug for questions. Any questions from anybody? We'll wait 10 seconds, and if not, we'll drop out of here. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll do this again next month with a different topic. If you have any suggestions or things you want to learn, shoot me an email. My email address is right there, synod@synodeskridge.com. I'll see you guys all next month.